Today's topic is going to be about spruce trees and how we seem to be struggling with keeping our trees looking healthy. As we look through the neighborhood, we find lots and lots of spruce trees that are showing some signs of dying, really brown needles, parts of the tree that's brown, just lots of various things going on with our spruce trees. And even the pine trees are starting to show some stress from different things. One of the things we're going to do today is I'm going to read an article that I got from Joe Zelnelnik out of Fargo. He's the forest specialist for NDSU. I'll read that to you, but I will also talk just a little bit about some of the things that I see. And when I look around the neighborhood, I see trees with these brown needles. I see shelter belts with trees where there's an odd tree in the middle that has perished. Or I've seen a shelter belt or one row of trees where maybe 4 or 5 in a row have showed signs of dying or is dead, and the ones right next to them are nice, healthy. Some of the things we don't understand is how that tree functions in the way that it does when we've had the abnormally high amount of water that we've had for the last 20 years, and now that it's dried up this last fall to be quite dry and going into this spring. Water on roots is not such a good thing, as it has a tendency to take the oxygen out of the soil, and even though we don't think a tree root would need some oxygen, it still does. So that could be one of the topics for a later time, but as we look at trees around the neighborhood, it sometimes becomes very difficult to decipher just really what is going on, or could it be old age. So with that said, I'm going to read what Joe had published, and then I'll finish up a little bit on the end if there's still time. So during this past month, pines and spruce trees throughout much of North Dakota have shown symptoms of decline. The causes are varied and treatment recommendations are equally diverse. North Dakota State University Extension Forester Joe Zelelnik says, in 2020, many ponderosa pine trees across the state died in shelter belts or yards. We believe that the extremely wet fall of 2019 is to blame. Zelelnik says soils were saturated in many areas, especially following the big snowstorm on October 10th through the 13th of 2019. Even areas that were not necessarily low spots accumulated a large amount of moisture. The saturated soil either killed the pine root systems directly or else kept the tree from developing full hardiness before going into the winter season. Symptoms on pines were dramatic. Entire trees died, showing symptoms throughout the whole tree, seemingly all at once. In most cases, the trees showed no progression of symptoms from the bottom to the top or interior to the exterior. Instead, trees began to grow in the spring of 2020, then simply stopped with the needles turning brown. Additional deaths of ponderosa pine are expected in 21. More recently, spruce trees have been showing a variety of symptoms that have also been diagnosed with the broad term of winter injury. Winter injury generally shows up early, as February, but is more commonly seen in March or April. Needles often turn in purplish brown as they die. This dieback can either be attributed to a particular disease or very likely nothing that we are familiar with and how it works that way. The other thing that can be odd is we can find branches throughout them trees that are dying, and the next branch beside it is okay. That could be something from canker, which is often in a spruce tree, but not always. Affected trees can be right next to the trees that are showing no symptoms. On occasion, entire trees may turn brown and die. Wildly fluctuating temperatures in February and March are often to blame for winter injury, Joe says. This year, the drought of 2020 is likely a major factor in damage. Additional pests such as spider mites, pine needle scale may also play a part, especially in trees where the damage doesn't follow a pattern. Treating trees is difficult because most of the damage is due to environmental problems. While trees lost most of their needles, they likely will not recover no matter what we do. For those trees that retain most of their needles, we need to make sure that we keep the trees otherwise healthy. Specifically, water those trees that are suffering from drought. A long, slow soaking is better than a multiple brief additions of water. Move the hose around the tree because the tree roots extend in all directions from the stem. The roots go far out beyond the drip line of the tree crown, extending to as far as 4 or 5 times the height of the tree. The ground should be moist and not saturated after watering. Joe also recommends scouting for pests, insects, and diseases and being prepared to treat them throughout the summer season. So just a couple more comments to make before I get off the air here today is when we look at watering, what he talked about in that slow watering, absolutely. Give it a good soaking, and one way I use to determine what a good soaking is take yourself like a 1/4 inch steel rod, and if you can push it in the ground firmly, but it goes in the ground, then you're probably at the right moisture condition. If it goes in the ground too easy, then you're way overwatered, and if you can't get it in the ground, you haven't watered enough. So one way to check that monitoring system for how much water them trees have. But I would really encourage you to go out and start watering your trees and getting them done as soon as you can that are in your yard. Of course, I know there's shelter belts and stuff that we can't just take the time because the process would take too long and consuming of other activities. But trees in the yard, let's get them watered. Fruit trees, spruce trees, don't matter. It was dry and they need some water.